go through that. I'm pretty much sure I'm not going to get through it because we're trying to cover what we did in 10 days and over 1,000 miles and do that in about 45 minutes. So I'm not too optimistic about getting that way through. We'll try our best. We went with Mark Carell. Mark Carell Ministries has several different trips, usually in a year. He's been to Israel 41 times. He's quite the expert and just a wonderful friend, pastor, preacher, expert, archaeological expert. Just a real joy to be under him and listen to him. There's about 16 of us that went. So that's a good number, a small number. They have had groups of 400 for Israel. Let's hear the next, see the next slide. That was our path, about 6,323 miles from Houston to Greece. Go ahead to the next slide. And this is scripture that relates to it. I'll just read it if you bear with me. Some days after Paul said unto Barnabas, let us go again and visit our brethren in every city where we have preached the word of the Lord and see how they do. In other words, this is their second trip. They're going to where they've already been, many places. And Barnabas determined to take with them John, whose surname was Mark. But Paul thought not good to take them, who departed from them from Pamphylia, and went not with them to the work. And the contention was so sharp between them that they departed asunder one from the other. And so Barnabas took Mark and sailed into Cyprus, and Paul chose Silas and departed, being recommended by the brethren unto the grace of God. They must have been Baptists, but they disagreed right off the bat. Paul had a problem with Mark because he left in the middle of the trip, in the first trip, missionary trip. But this was not a feud that went on and on. They amicably settled this. Later on, it's not an issue with Mark or Barnabas. So it's just one of those disagreements that they went their own way, agreed to disagree, and went on with spreading the gospel. Okay, next slide. This is generally the path. Starting in Jerusalem and makes quite a trip in a circle. This actually takes about 3 years, so it's not a 10-day trip. Sometimes we forget that. This was an extended missionary journey. Happened really between, some say 49 to 53, this says 50 to 54. It's about three and a half years. We didn't hit any means everywhere that Paul stopped. We pretty much went in this area. I'm pointing on the back screen like that. We already got a problem. In this area for the people. I know exactly what I meant. Okay, next slide. Okay, we flew into Athens, of course, which is the center of the whole area, actually. But that was our base for a day or so. And then the next slide. And that was the scene out our window, actually. That's the parking lot. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. That's the top of the Acropolis. That was just east of our window. Okay, next slide. And we boarded a ship for the first 3 days and sailed out of port the next morning after we landed in Athens. Okay, next slide. That's the girl I took with me. Next slide. Our first stop was Mykonos. There's really no significance about Paul there. This is really a tourist island, beautiful island. There's 6,000 islands in the Greek, in the Aegean Sea, and it's considered Greek islands. 6,000. And I think only about, I've got that written down, 227 have a population of over 100 people, with the rest adding less. There's only 227 of those 6,000 that's even inhabited. Okay, next. And that is from a distance, Mykonos inhabitants. This is a typical way that islands are settled along the coast. I didn't realize how much mountainous, how mountainous Greece is, and every island. So they typically, for accessibility, they'll settle right along the seashore or up the mountain. And typically they're all white. They really stand out on a sunny day. It's just a beautiful picture. Okay, next slide. And that's coming into the harbor there. Next slide. Fishing is a big thing, obviously, in Greece. They're so close to the sea. Next slide. That's just some shops in the area around the bay. Next slide. Then from Mykonos, we sailed to Ephesus. Ephesus, of course, is in Turkey. And we went in the harbor there and spent a good half day tour of Ephesus. Okay, next slide. Nothing happened that day. That's the port. The Odyssey, I have a hard time saying that word, but that's where we had to go in the port to go to Ephesus. Okay, next slide. This was our guy. His name is John, and it's spelled C-A-N. If you figure that out, that's why I don't know Greek yet. He's from Turkey, and he's been guided for 20 years. He's quite a resource and information. Okay, next slide. Ephesus was established in the peak of its all the construction of the building around 1500 BC. It was a port city, but now the sea has, because of seismic activity, earthquakes and whatnot, it's receded. The sea is way out there when it used to be right up to the edge of the city. And over time, this over 3,000 years basically, this area developed into a kind of marshland, a delta area, and then it was all covered with silt. Everything that you see here was covered with tons of mud, and they only started excavating that, I believe, in the late 1800s. They've been working on it for about 150 years, and even today, only 10% of it's uncovered. You think, well, you can just go in there with a bulldozer. Well, you can't go with a bulldozer in archaeological sites. They take a small spoon or a spade and clear this, what you see in the last 150 years. So it's incredible about archaeology. I meant to have a display, and I apologize for that. But if you can imagine, this is my definition of archaeology. You have several, let's imagine these are boxes. They're all boxes of puzzles with thousands of millions of pieces in each box. And somebody takes a steamroller and just rolls it all over after somebody's stolen pieces out of every box. And then you go back and try to sort everything out. That's about what archaeology is. It's incredible the work that these people do and devote their life to. Go years and years not finding anything and find something significant, and it's you hear about it. But people devote their lives to archaeology, and we can talk about it in a few minutes, but it's amazing science. Okay, next slide. This is a road, the road that goes down towards the entrance of the ancient city that would be near the port, or the harbor. Okay, next slide. This is actual road bed. It's out of marble. And even then, things got slick. So these are stored areas just to keep from slipping. That was done thousands of years ago. Okay, next slide. We saw this relic here, this carving here that was apparently a pharmacy medical facility, and this, of course, is the sign for medicine today that we're all familiar with. Even Blue Cross Blue Shield has that sign, and that was this is probably 3,000 plus years old. This carving, and still depicted probably a medical center or some water pharmacy service. Okay, next one. This was an interesting point we pointed out. This was a foot on a sphere representing the world. But at 1500 BC, they hadn't established that the world was really round yet. They had that knowledge a long time before. A lot of people thought it was flat even in the 500 AD. But this was 1500 BC, and they had a concept, the right concept, that the world was round and not flat. Just an interesting side. Okay, next, everywhere's got their latrines. This is the bathroom. I don't know if you remember, I showed this in Israel. This is a public toilet. So you're sitting with your neighbor, taking care of business. As you discuss politics, things were different back then. This was actually a water trough. The water continually ran through here. It also ran through here to take care of the waste. And this was a water trough that they used for cleaning purposes.
Tell about the frogs.
Over here was an interior, I don't have a picture of it, an interior area that would have been really lush with vegetation and a lot of water in there and a lot of growing green plants. And they would keep frogs there that would make so much noise that would cover the human sounds that you didn't want to share. I don't know if that's coming back or not, probably. Next slide. That's just close up. Really get to know your neighbor well. Next slide. This was the library, Celsius, where it was likely that Paul spoke because there was a synagogue close around here, reputed, but they just haven't uncovered it yet. Interestingly, Paul, being a Jew and wanting to convince the Jews of the good news, the gospel, he always went to the synagogue first. That was where he would go into wherever, Ephesus or Corinth or wherever he went. That's where they went to meet. Now, synagogue, we think of it, well, that's a church. Well, it's not exactly. It was really a meeting place, almost like a pub. Not that they went to drink, but you know that, I know in the northern states, it struck me that everybody gathers at the pub, whether you drink or not. It's just a gathering place. And the synagogue was sort of similar to that. They gathered and they would debate or talk about current events, or if you had something to say, you were welcome to stand up and say it. So there was always a welcome mat for anybody to speak. And Paul took advantage of that everywhere he went. Of course, you'll notice, you know as well, they sometimes be driven out, by the Jews, the stalwart Jews that didn't want to take the gospel for truth. We'll get to some of those situations, but I thought it was interesting. My concept of synagogue is always kind of, well, that's a church kind of place. Well, it's more than that, really. It's more secular than we give it credit for, and it was a place of just debate, discussion, presenting views of different sorts. Okay. This is a road leading again down towards the entrance of the city, and that's marble. All the way down, just several hundred feet. This is interesting here. Underneath all this labyrinth of roads was the water that was being wastewater carried under the city to the bay. Next slide. And that is a manhole. That was actually a manhole, 3,000 years old. They would go down and check things out underneath the city highway periodically. That's a metal hook that they can pick up. On his second journey, he says he came to Ephesus and left him there, but he himself entered into the synagogue, as I said, and reasoned with the Jews. When they desired him to tarry longer time with them, he consented not, but bade them farewell, saying, I must by all means keep this feast that cometh in Jerusalem, but I will return again unto you. He was in a hurry, the second journey through Ephesus, to get back to Jerusalem to celebrate Pentecost, I think. But the third journey, was a significant issues that happened there. The whole city was filled with confusion. You had called Gaius. If you remember the story, these men of Macedonia and Paul's companions and travel, they rushed with one accord into the theater. And just briefly, there was a lot of activity, spiritual activity, both demonic and gospel activity during this third journey that I think Paul was there about 3 months. And really, the evangelism exploded in that whole area. And at the same time, conflict or pushback from the Jewish and some demonic followers was active as well. And it came to the point where they had a confrontation, and Paul was just going to rush right in to hit the next slide. Go ahead and hit the next. Into this theater here and explain this situation, try to calm the group down. There was hundreds of people that had gathered in this theater just shouting, you know, we owe allegiance to Diana, not my wife, but the God of Diana. And it was really a groundswell of resistance. And he would have literally probably been killed if he just walked out there, because they knew him well, what he was doing. And his fellow disciples, fellow travelers, actually restrained him and kept him from going in. That actually happened at this site right here. Okay, next slide.
Is that solid rock?
Sir?
Well,
Yes. Yes.
It's solid rock.
Well, you know, it's not carved out of the wall, but all that is raw. Huge stone. Okay. And this is going down to the actual port, or the port. Continue to pay, and the water's going underneath this all the way down to get the wastewater away from the thing. We stopped on a side road, side trip at a Turkish rug manufacturer, handmade Turkish rug. I don't know, you can't see it in this picture, but she's holding up filaments that connect to every one of these little things. These are cocoons, silkworm cocoons, and you can't see it here, but there's fibers going up there. Next slide, and that runs into a loom or a gathering point for all this thread, and they grow and reproduce these silkworms. And that filament is so strong that it continues to just peel off of those cocoons into a thread. That's pretty interesting. There's at the loom they're making a silk robe. Okay, next slide. And here he is doing a pretty good job of trying to sell us one. We got out there without trying. This is our ship in port there. Okay, next slide. I love this. Genuine fake white. Not only genuine, not only fake, they're genuine fake. Next slide. Those from the ship. Next slide. And then we go to Patmos. You're familiar with what happened in Patmos. John was imprisoned there, probably at the age of 92, and was given the revelation. Okay? And John and also his brother companion tribulation in the kingdom of patience of Jesus Christ was in the isle that is called Patmos, the word of God, the testimony of Jesus Christ. There's a cornerstone of that place. And this is actual cave that reputedly is where John was revealed, where Revelation was revealed to him, and he wrote the book. Oh, and that's where he laid his head, and that's where he raised up and grabbed to stand up. This was the reportedly the cleft of the rock that the word of God split the three pieces. This is more tradition than fact. I like what Mark said. If my God spoke to a rock, you wouldn't see that rock anymore. It exploded off the top of that mountain. So this is sort of tradition here. This is a beautiful place, beautiful view. This is the harbor there off of the Isle of Patmos. Okay, next. We're a long way from the ship. Next place we go is Crete, the island of Crete. Okay, next one. On the island of Crete, this is one of the oldest excavated cities and palaces that they have found. Crete, this palace is called Knossos. Almost 6,000 years ago is when they first showed inhabitants on this island. This construction started about 1700 BC, construction of the palace. Interesting construction. These columns here, these are cypress trees, and at the root side is turned up. So from physics, it really made a lot of sense to bear more weight if you put the wider part at the top. And of course, there's no cypress left. They've seen petrified, remains and stuff. They constructed this. I mean, these are almost 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 stories tall. And that's back in 1700 BC. Just amazing. If you remember, Greek mythology is pretty big in Greece. And it's interesting, even today, we have to catch ourselves sometimes about talking about Greek mythology as if it was true. And there's so many things in our culture that have derived from the Greek mythology and Greek culture that, Zeus, he lived on, Mount Olympus, and you talk about the gods as if they were really existing. Well, they didn't. You have to pitch yourself and knock yourself that, wait a minute, this is just fictitious. But anyway, one of the ancient stories, and maybe familiar with you, on Crete is the king of this palace was King Minos, M-I-N-O-S. And they mix in their fact with fiction and myth and history, and it's hard to distinguish the two. But you remember in Greek mythology about the bull, the man with a bull head, and the body of a man. You remember that Minotaur? That comes from the Crete. It comes from this area. The myth comes from that area and the stories. They celebrate the bull in many respects, and that story about the labyrinth. You heard about the labyrinth. The Minotaur was in the middle of the labyrinth. I won't go into detail, but anyway, that originated from Crete. That's another example of this is fabricated today. That's one of the pillars. That was cypress. There was many cypress growing in this area, and they would take the root side and put it at the top and take it down. But you got a lot more support that way. Okay, next one. And there's a mosaic celebrating the bull that was a big thing in their culture. Next slide. This mountain is where springs were, and they piped water from there to the palace. Next slide. This is sort of optical illusion. This is a grave over a hole in the ground. But you see this right here? That is clay pipe. This is a tapered end, and this is a big end. This pipe sticks into that bigger end, just similar to our same pipes that we use today. That's the same concept. When you put a sewer of lines together, it fits together just like that. Well, that's about 3,000 years old. They use the same technology to pipe water from that mountain I showed you into the palace. They had running water, running toilets, running bathing facilities. Just incredible. 3,000 years ago. Okay. Here's another trough of water would run out of here, wastewater would run out of here and down the hill. to be disposed of at the lower end of the mountain. Another shot of those pillars. This was a theater area that they would line, these are steps to, a performance would be in this area, and they would line that area to see the performance. Santorini doesn't have really any biblical significance to the Paul's second journey, but it is probably the most beautiful place on earth, so I wanted to show it to you. Okay, next slide. It sits atop at the cliff, edge of the cliff of this sheer face wall on the island of Santorini. This is the path that you go if you walk up that way. Okay? Next one. You see it here. It's a zigzag trail. But there is a trolley car that we decided to take. Next.
Or you could have written it down.
Yeah. Next slide. There she is. Next slide. This is a view from the top. Just incredible, breathtaking views everywhere you look. Whitewash River. And that's a ship. Interestingly, I'll show you a shot in a minute. Somewhere around 1800 BC, this was all one big island. And the volcano erupted and just lifted the center part of it out, just blew it out. It created a tsunami so big that it destroyed the previous place I showed you at Mykonos, the palace. That was part of the destruction that caused. It was just incredible force that took place with that eruption. And the next slide, these are some of Diana's cousins, kinfolks that we met there. That's another way to get up the hill. You can ride there. Another pretty shot. And then you get an idea of how this was shaped. It was one big island, and then it exploded, erupted, and shot the center of it out. That's just a coastline shot on the way back to the tender. Then we go to Corinth. That ended our cruise, so we're back on dry land now. And Corinth was the first place that we stopped. Okay, next slide. And you found a certain Jew named Philip, born in Pontus, who recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla. And he came to them, so because he was of the same trade, he stayed with them and worked, but occupation they were tent makers. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and persuaded both Jews and Greeks. On his second journey, when Paul came to Corinth, he stayed there a year and a half, working with Aquila and Pontus and as a tent maker. And so he established a lot of contacts there. He started a church, of course. Corinth is interesting. It's strategically located. Let's see. Can you back up one, Steve? Right here was where Corinth was. So it was located in between the Ionian Sea, which is really part of the Mediterranean Sea, and the Aegean Sea. So it was really 17 highways converge on that area. It was really a big place of activity, multicultural, wealth at the time that before and after Paul was there. So you had it was just a melting pot of wealth, and commerce, and nationality. It was a buzzing place. But through the years, one of the biggest problems, which in many areas of Greece, are earthquakes. Earthquakes did so much devastation over the centuries that Corinth had its share. It was just dilapidated many times and affected by earthquakes, as well as being, overtaken and marauded and burned with the next conqueror that came through. That had its share of problems. One key thing, you can go to the next slide, the next one. That's a temple, what's left of the temple of Apollo. Next. This is the Bema seat that was in, a Bema seat that was in Corinth. It's mentioned in the Bible. It says, and when Paul was now about to open his mouth, again at a synagogue or next to an area where a lot of people gathered, which Bema Seat would be a place of common ground where everybody gathered. Now, Bema Seat, judgments were made at the Bema Seat. It was a political, governmental area, but it's right in the middle of everything, right in the middle of the marketplace, right where people buzz by. So it's very intertwined in the fabric of the people. But this account says, Eliah said unto the Jews, if it were a matter of wrong or wicked lewdness, O ye Jews, reason what would that I should bear with you. If it be a question of words and names of your law, look ye to it, for I will be no judge of such matters. And he drove them from the judgment seat. Then all the Greeks took Sosthenes, the chief ruler of the synagogue, and beat him before the judgment seat. And Gamaliel cared for none of these things. Gamaliel was the official who would be standing at the Bema Seat making judgments over things, and the Jews brought Sosthenes, tried to stir up an insurrection against Paul, and Gamaliel said, I don't want to hear about this. This ain't got anything to do with it. He just sort of cast it away. And because Sosthenes brought it up, they beat him right there in front of the judgment seat. So this main is there just to point out that that was an actual physical location that Paul was at. And again, first went to the synagogues, and then it's a point that was made that's interesting. Like I said, everything was so interrelated, and Paul had a unique ability to appeal to politicians, beggars on the street, Jewish, Gentiles, governmental leaders. He was so, and debaters, people who were heavy into the Greek religion. He could get on common ground and communicate because of his intelligence, his education. He was instrumental in putting everybody on level ground. In other words, if you had a haughty politician come up, and try to intimidate you, well, Paul wasn't threatened by that. He could just communicate with them, unlike the majority of people during that time. And as a result, many politicians, many leaders were converted. And that, you can imagine, people of influence, people of wealth, if they get converted, sometimes they can make even more of an impact because of the relationships they have, because of opening doors to the gospel. So Paul benefited the Christian and the way, the Christian message in ways that were really unique to Paul. I guess I've undervalued Paul's role, through the years, but this helped illuminate me as to what a key individual Paul was. This mountain here is called Arrow Corinth. It was settled many years before this was actually created. This is Corinth. There's fortifications up here. There's an impressive wall structure that cascades down through here and zigzags. It's amazing, again, what man can do. And looking back and seeing what they had to work with, how they got materials up there, it's incredible. Next slide. I don't know what kind of pose that is. Pretty cute. Next. This is just an idea of the land around throughout Greece. If you add water, you can grow anything. It's sort of like Israel. If it didn't have water, it looks like a desert. You add water, and it's just fertile. You can just grow anything. These are millions of olive trees. Next line. These are olive trees. Next line. We stopped by the pottery place. Pottery is unique in that archaeologists use it to date and zero in on different eras of civilization. And that has, for centuries, been a way to track located, so people, different cultures. Next slide. Then we travel north into northern Greece. Next slide. Actually, we stayed over one night in Athens. This is just an idea. Everybody wants to, in the city, it's really thick with, concrete and steel, but everybody wants to have their green spot. You see on a lot of apartment buildings, there's something green growing where they can get a plant. Okay. That's from our hotel room as well. It's a parking lot there. This is Mount Olympus. This is where I said, they thought Zeus lived and all the other gods. We passed out on the way up to North Greece. Thermopylae. Anybody know the significance of Thermopylae? Anybody? Anybody heard of the 300? The Battle of the 300? Leonidas. This is the location. This is the place where, in 480 BC, about 300 Spartans, with at some point the help of about 700 Thesbians, held off for 3 days 1.7 million Persians. Next slide there. They stopped at this Leonidas. That's just a statue tribute. Okay, next slide. Next. This, the sea is on this side, the Aegean Sea. During that time, the sea was actually closer up here, so it encroached, pushed this up, so that this was the only area to get by between the mountain and the sea. And that's where the 300 made their last stand. And held, 1.7 million people off for 3 days, a pretty good feat. The Spartans, were legendary in their ability to fight. They lived to die fighting. And Leonidas was their king. But they had a traitor, as much as something sometimes happens. And on the third day, that traitor led the Persians around to the backside. There was a secret pass through the mountains. And they led them and had a rear attack, so they surrounded them and wiped them all out. But the famous saying that comes out of this, Leonidas was approached by the Persian, King Xerxes, and he says, "You lay down your arms, and we'll give you." He said, "Give us your arms," and Leonidas' response was, "Come and get it." And that's an age-old phrase that comes out of that, and it's used over and over when duty tries to overcome the odds. You as a soldier, you fight to the last second. Okay, number 8. That's a stork. We think it's probably got one jumping baby under it. We're just hoping there's not 2 under it. This is an outcrop of a stone mountain that's different from any other surrounding the area. It's called Meteora. And this is where all the monasteries that I spoke about, I think, a couple of last Sunday, are located. Okay, hit the next. Go ahead. We're making a circle around this big mountain. Okay, next. That's a monastery right there. Incredible feat of mankind to go up here and build this thing right into the rock. There's a lot. These ladies the ladies have to wear a skirt to go into an Orthodox Greek monastery like these. So that they're modeling their skirt. They put a scarf or something. Cats are all over Greece. Supposedly, they don't have a national push to neuter or spay cats. It's real tempting not to see how we fall off that. Anyway, they're everywhere. Everywhere you stop, cats. We went to Ephesus, and there were cats in the lavatories in the bathroom. I mean, it's ridiculous. That's a commode. in a Greek monastery. I thought this was interesting to see all this amazing mountainous, fortified monasteries that are difficult to get in. And they've got about a 6-foot lift. This is a nun that got in here and went up 6 feet to go through there to get in that door instead of taking the steps. That's ironic. When you've got a monastery like that on a cliff. Now, these were built here because of fortification. A lot of the wealth and riches were held in the monasteries. So they built them in places that the Turks and other invaders couldn't get to. That's why they chose this area, one reason. And one reason they considered it a really holy place. There's 20, I think in past there's been 26 or 28 monasteries that are built in this area, and I think 6 are active now.
Stan, did you go through the monastery?
I'm sorry?
Did you go inside the monastery?
We did. All of these are Greek Orthodox.
Do they have modern conveniences such as satellite television, internet, things like that?
You know, I don't know about that. You saw the commode. Next. Isn't it incredible? If you
How
can
do you
do
go
it?
there, Stan?
It's a good question. Tons. That's a failed one. There's one that was built there. There's another area there that didn't last for some reason. This is a restaurant we went in Kalambaka, which is at the base of Neora, and this is one of the best meals we had the whole trip. We just go in the kitchen, walk around the pots, and this matriarch who's there, 3rd or 4th generation, 4th generation, would dip you out what you wanted. Not a lot of health department's concerned in that part. It was very nice, very good. Berea, for what our namesake, we were able to stop at Berea. And the brethren immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night to Berea. When they arrived in the synagogue of the Jews, they were more fair-minded than those of Thessalonica, and that they received the word already and searched the Scriptures daily. You've heard that before. To find out whether these things are so. Therefore, many of them believed, and also not a few of the Greeks, but prominent women as well. And the story is, and the message is that, you know, I'll have to show you something first. I'll tell you. We're going in reverse. It's just the way that the trip is laid out. Paul went in this direction. We go in this direction. So I didn't make a big point of that. I'm just trying to hit the high point because it gets confusing. But we're going in reverse. So Paul would have been at Thessalonica and kind of was driven out of Thessalonica. Then he comes to Berea and he's well received by some people, by the Jewish believers. And they go on and on about how wonderful the people, the believers at Berea were. And we talked about, wonder why Berea, there wasn't a letter to the Bereans, like there's a letter to Corinthians and Ephesians. The Bereans had it together. They believed. They searched the Scriptures for themselves. They didn't need letters from Paul. They were an inspiration to Paul. I thought that was really an insight and interesting. These is just a shrine or a tribute to Paul. Paul is standing there teaching the Bereans. And this is just a tribute to Paul from the Bereans. Okay. Okay, next one. This is where we stayed in Thessalonica. The next is Philippi, about 5 minutes. Saved from Troy, we ran straight courses to Samothrace, and the next day came to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi. This is one city of the part of Macedonia. We were staying in this city for some days. Philippi was a big step. This was a jump into Macedonia. It was a jump into literal, the pagan Gentile world, and it was a key place in our history as Christians. And you know the story. Go ahead to the next one. This is on the way. This is another example of all over. That was a vineyard. These are olive trees again. Next slide. Vineyards everywhere. This is a plain. This plain area extends for hundreds of miles, really, in the northern part of Greece. It's extremely fertile. This is a breadbasket kind of Greece. A lot of produce comes out of this area. Okay? And this is the jail, the jail that in Philippi that all the sides were chained to prison. They laid many stripes on him, they put him in prison, demanding the jail to keep him secure. Having received such a charge, he put them into the inner prison, fastened their feet and stopped. But at midnight, while Paul and Silas were praying, singing unto God, prisoners were listening. Earthquake comes, as is common in that area. We would shudder to think about earthquake. Earthquake was an everyday occurrence almost in there. And you know the story that they were freed. But as a result of their, literally as a result of their singing and praying, the jailer was impressed upon the fact that they got something out of the house. And his household, he and his household became believers. And the story goes on. I know we're running out of time. But again, Paul, let's see the next slide. You see it's a dark and dingy place. Next, across the street, across the way at the Agora, this is the town, the city of Philippi. But the rest of the story is what's so amazing in Philippi. They were set to let, Paul go. They were going to let him go. But Paul said, you've done something wrong. I'm going to take you to task. That was, again, who would do that? Unless you were super intelligent, super sure of yourself. Of course, he had the Holy Spirit, too. And made an issue of the fact that people believed as a result of him saying, no, we're going to handle it the right way, or you're not going to shut me down. And I just thought, again, he appealed to all levels of society, both the jailer and the political leaders. Okay? You have to stop. Next slide. It's a huge area. In other words, guttering, the way they dispelled water, this is an intricate top of the column. And then this is the story about Lydia, who's actually the first documented by name believer in Europe. She holds that distinction. And there was a monastery in her honor that we stopped by and saw, and that's by the river, brook, apparently, allegedly, she was baptized. So they have a site. Go ahead. They have a site set up in tribute to her, and that's what that happened with that. The interesting thing about Greek Orthodox churches, I have never seen a picture of anybody smiling in Greek Orthodox church. They have all these smug faces, and any priest you see in there looks about the same way. But, we're running out of time. I'm not going to hold you up. There's a few more things maybe we can show you later. That's, apologize for going so fast, but my goodness. 10 days is hard to sum up in 40 minutes or so. We appreciate the opportunity to share with you. Maybe we can share the rest of the story one of these days. I'm going to dismiss in prayer, and then we'll get ready for the worship service. Father, thank you so much for the freedom we have to see your handiwork, to appreciate how you are present throughout all the ages. Lord, help us to conceive of how we can make you real today. as others like Paul have shown us what's really important. Help us to internalize and do the same thing. There are many idols, Lord, that were present. We saw in Paul's time. But Lord, we have plenty of here to take away our eyes from looking on you. Help us to be strong. Help us to put you first. Help us to surrender everything to you. Use us, we pray, and prepare our hearts now for the worship service of your Son's name. I still believe